For the past 7 years, the DA administration in the city of Cape Town has been trying to expropriate land from landowners in Fish Hoek. Now, why would they want to do that? Surely they're against expropriation without compensation. Now, here's the thing. They've found a way around it by destroying property values deliberately. See, if the property value goes down enough, then homeowners are forced to sell. And the only people they can sell to that actually want to purchase this land will be the city. What the city wants to do with this is, well, let's let David explain to you.
So I am standing on Lock Hill Road down here in the deep south, and what's happening here is of critical importance for everyone not just living down in the deep south like Simonstown, Scarborough, Noordhoek, Ocean View, Fish Hoek, but the rest of Cape Town. It's actually very sad. What's basically happening is coercive expropriation of private land. So back in 2018, the local government tried to expropriate these lands directly. The people said no. They formed an NPC to try to oppose this. But then what happened is that a bit of a different method was then used, which is called coercive expropriation. So through the spatial development framework, what they are now trying to do is to basically create the environment where that forces the local landowners here to sell. They are planning on doing something like moving people to a temporary location somewhere behind me here. I'm not too sure the exact location, but it is here. Having a temporary location there is going to bring down the value of the land by creating the environment that forces the seller to sell, even though they're not willing to sell. They're not willing sellers, but they become willing sellers out of desperation through the coercive activities that happen through the spatial development framework. And if you go read the latest spatial development framework, it has in there 10,000 units. That's what it says there. To be clear, it has not been approved by the DA-led City Council. Just to be clear, it's an internal process and it may be turned down. But that's a moot point. That's irrelevant. The final draft, which is what it's called, of the spatial development framework has 10,000 units that could be built between Ocean View, Lock Hill, Noordhoek and Fish Hoek. And here's one fact you must understand is that the spatial development framework is informed by the IDP, the Integrated Development Plan. And this is a plan that's approved by the DA-led City Council. It's got their stamp of approval, the IDP. As you know, the DA has majority in the City Council, 58%. People in this area who own land, private property owners, need to understand that if this goes through, it sets the precedent for how their land can be expropriated coercively. So it's a way around.
So then you might well ask, why are they targeting Lock Hill Road? Why this area? After all, there is a much more logical area into which Masiphumelele is already expanding. That impinges on Noordhoek and the residents around Michelle Lake. A lot of these are foreign residents. They pay very much higher rates, and they can afford to pay the legal fees required to stop any unwanted development. People in Lock Hill can't. All they have is a few votes they can wield. This is not something the DA respects. So the landowners accuse the municipality of orchestrating the destruction of their property values to allow for ease of expropriation. Now, this is clear looking at the policy history. Initially, the city tried to expropriate the property forcefully, and then they looked at the option of using the new Expropriation Act, and then they backed down from that as well and realized that actually using the Expropriation Act is much more difficult because then you have to actually justify it, right? This, they barely have to justify. There's only one little legal caveat that they've had to go through, in order to do what they're doing. Now, that is declaring the land unproductive. That's interesting. So it doesn't matter that there are people who are running businesses, employing actual people from Masiphumelele as well. No. All of that has to be destroyed. This justification is being used specifically to build what is called a temporary relocation area. In fact, what this is a blikkiesdorp, a bunch of shacks that are built specifically by the city. So now this is going to be at the site's entrance and is intended to accommodate 1,350 households, 5,000 people, including non-nationals ineligible for permanent housing. Interesting, right? So the city admits this is basically permanent and there's nothing you're going to be able to do. And it naturally will overwhelm local infrastructure, sewage, water, traffic. And it means that, any local schools will have to accommodate all of these people because it's no longer legally allowed for you to deny anyone access to government schooling. See, there are ample alternatives here, including there's 2,637 hectares of vacant municipal land that are outside biodiversity areas. There are relocation vouchers, developer swaps, but the city's priorities don't lie there. It's about expanding Masiphumelele. The thing is, operations like this are just downstream of other behaviors by the city. The residents that the city plans to move to Fish Hoek actually came from an area of the adjacent township in which the city wants to turn into a highway after deleting the local wetlands. The Noordhoek Environmental Action Group has taken to the city to court to protect the breeding grounds of the endangered western leopard toad. The reason the city spends all its time shunting residents about like pieces in a sliding puzzle is that they've been incentivizing both land invasions and foreign property investment. They can't afford to touch the foreign owned luxury areas because the city relies on them for revenue to fund services that they are giving to non tax paying illegal settlers. But having pushed a policy of handing out the title deeds and free utilities to land invaders since 2006, there's little land left available. So Jordan Hill Lewis's new policy is using coercive measures to dump tens of thousands of housing units on unsuspecting legacy residents, even if it means destroying local economies. So sometimes, in the case of Eerste Rivier's Itemba small farms, they've used force, fraud, and bribery, even illegally shutting off water, violating a 2010 court order to leave the residents alone. The coloured farmers at Itemba, who were forced off their land, forced into accommodation that was made by clearing further residents out of their land using illegal and, in fact, legally impotent threats of cutting off of SASA grants. That community has been in place since the early 90s, before the current democratic dispensation, when a group of coloured farmers working on a farm were abandoned by the farm owner and continued farming under their own aegis. The city wanted to build houses for 27,000 new residents on this land. And all of this could have been avoided if the DA had an actual strategy for dealing with land invasions. They had been in control of the provincial parliament since 2011, but they've never tried reforming eviction legislature, despite housing being a provincial competency. And instead, from the very moment they got their first foothold in the province, the party has tried to outflank the ANC from the left on land issues, while paying lip service to their legacy voting basis concerns. The city is now the second worst for land invasions in the country after Durban, and the province is the worst of all 9 provinces. The rate of formal settlement, the proportion of the population in formal housing, has fallen from 85% in 2003 to 82% in 2013 to now just 80% in 2023. So a fifth of the population is living in squatter camps. But see, in the rest of the country in this period, the national level of formal housing went from 74% That's well below the Western Cape, all the way up to 84% today. That's higher than where the Western Cape is. It went from third place to dead last. This means, based on population statistics from these years, that around 680,000 people lived in informal settlements in 2003, 1 million in 2013, and 1.5 million in 2023. So that's 88% of the size of the population born outside the province. It's a very close correlation. The main mechanisms frustrating the clearance of illegal settlements are PI and ESTA Acts. Now, the PI Act is the Prevention of Illegal Eviction Act, and the ESTA is the Extension of Security of Tenure Act. Now, that is more or less the same, but applies to rural land and has some other provisions. But this is not the only factor. DA, since 2006, have instituted a policy called violence prevention through urban upgrading. In practice, this is a German-backed initiative that basically gives free title deeds and utilities to anyone who will steal land. Now, as we know, this is not merely a practice of indigence. It's largely organized by gangs and by those connected to the ANC and the EFF, who will stake out claims and rent them at extortionate rates to newcomers from the Eastern Cape on the province of jobs. Now, there are several fixes to this problem. The DA could back the People's Bill. They could back an amendment to the PI Act. They could grab their powers back over almost anything. There are mechanisms, but they have rejected these options over and over and over again. Mainly because they've been planning for entering national government, it seems clear that they aren't actually interested in protecting property rights. In fact, the way the city's behaving, it's almost like the Expropriation Act is too restrictive for them. Apparently, there's not a lot of legal options left for the people living in Noordhoek. And if they want to look after their property, there's basically only one thing they can do. Councillors have told them, more or less, that the party and the city will not hear anything they have to say. They're not really interested in it. They'll play for time, but eventually they'll try and get their way, and it's going to cost them way too much to sue the city. So no one can really afford to. Now, just last week, the referendum party ran, well, the referendum. Well, no, they ran a poll of about 1,500 people in the Fish Hoek area. Fish Hoek itself only has about 5,000 people living in it. And so this is a fairly sizable proportion. They asked 4 questions, which is, do you support the city's plan to relocate residents from Masipulele into Fish Hoek, Ocean View, and the Lock Hill Road small holdings? Do you support building a low-cost housing development in Elgin Park next to Bay Primary? Do you believe in the Deep South that they can handle more population growth without harming local services and the environment? And do you believe that the city of Cape Town should continue the spatial development plan? For all 4, they got between 93 and 98% rejection of the city's policies. This is a fairly resounding result. The amount that support this policy is less than the amount of black people in South Africa that support the DA, which is 4%. In the Western Cape, that number is even smaller, closer to 1 to 2%. This means that the DA is conducting a sort of marginal arbitrage on potential votes in the area, which is unlikely to result in any gains for the party, and is more likely going to result in a rejection of the party in the upcoming local elections. Now, this is not the only example of the DA undermining their own constituents. The most egregious is the destruction of the central business district. Under Jordan Hill-Lewis's new plans, there are going to be 50,000 low-income residents dumped into the central business district. Whether or not you believe in combating apartheid spatial planning, or however you care to frame this issue, there is a more subtle problem. The reason that the Cape Town Central Business District has managed to flourish is that it is run by one of the DA's flagship policies, the City Improvement Districts. Now, CIDs are highly profitable corporate interests that the DA pre-approves to run municipal districts. It requires a 60% buy-in from the residents in the area, and it adds costs on top of existing rates. Central Business District at the moment only has 3,500 permanent residents, meaning that getting a 60% buy-in from these high-income earners is not hard. Local businesses and local residents can contribute rates fairly easily. However, should Cape Town actually go through with this, which it seems like they are doing, they already have the building permits and the planning permits arranged, the ability to maintain the CID will disappear. And all of the policing and private security and the beautification processes that keep the central business district from collapsing will also disappear. The ability to maintain tenure and property values will go. The ability to maintain functioning businesses will go. And we will have a collapse of the city from the center, much like Johannesburg in the 90s, only somewhat accelerated due to the population pressures on the city. However, Jordan Hill-Lewis will be able to report that he has delivered more housing, and this will do well for his ability to run for leadership of the party once Helen Zille steps down, as is widely rumored to be the succession plans within the party. Voting for the DA is voting for more of this wherever they govern. And it seems to me that forcing middle-class flight repeatedly over and over again, destroying property values, destroying intergenerational wealth, and destroying stability, economic or otherwise, is broadly a bad move. This has been Robert Daigen for the Cape Independent. Please subscribe and visit the website in the description for more updates and analysis. I'll see you soon.